Ann has over 25 years of experience as an educator and an instructor, as well as various nonprofit roles. She's been at several universities: Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Texas Christian, University of South Carolina, a few international as well. Spent time as a foreign service officer as well. So has just a depth of experience on all things energy, the geopolitics of energy, and energy infrastructure. Not to mention just a really impressive communicator when it comes to all things energy affordability. And I think one of the things I love about Ann most that's not on her resume or in her bio is that she is unabashedly and unapologetically pro-free market. You use the phrase free market a lot, which is sometimes not as much in vogue these days, but I think it's important given the economic and environmental benefits that the free market provides. So Ann, thanks for being here. Thanks for closing us out today. I want to first start can you tell people a little bit about the Hamm Institute? I know it's a really interesting value proposition where you're doing education, you're doing policy research, but you also have kind of lab assets too to really engage with the private sector on innovative technology solutions. Can you explain kind of the origin of why the Hamm Institute exists and kind of what you've done so far?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Nick, for having me, and C3 and Drew and all the partners and everyone that's sticking around. I don't know if it's me or the booze that you're probably about to get to partake in, but I'm happy to be here and always excited to represent the Hamm Institute and by proxy, Harold Hamm. This organization it's fairly new. I call it a startup. I feel honored to be able to try to help him launch it. I've been there about a year and a half now. And it is truly from the beginning, all he has been preaching and all he wants to achieve through the Institute is energy security. And anything that falls within that envelope, and this was 4 years ago before people were it wasn't a buzzword, right? And so anything that falls in that envelope, we cover and we touch. And so when you think Harold Hamm, and if you read the article in the New York Times on Sunday, the cover of the Business Review, and we were all worried what it was going to be and what he was going to say. And that reporter had been following all of us around for a year. Literally a year, has been at every event we've been at, has tried to do multiple interviews with no comment. And we were thrilled with the article. So if you haven't read it, read it, because it to me really honors what Mr. Hamm has done in his career, which has been work with every single administration, Republican and Democrat, to make sure we get as much energy to as many people as possible in the world at the most affordable possible rate that they can get their hands on it, and hopefully then allow more energy to flow into their homes and their lives, just get better and their economies grow when that happens. And that's at the heart of everything Mr. Hamm does and why he started the Institute. So for us and how we're spending our time these days, specifically is really, really trying to help convene industry and government to, in this time of amazing opportunity and a speed and a pace that we've never seen, make sure that really everybody gets a chance to get what they need for their organizations and their companies to be able to prosper in this time, and to help the U.S. government, right? To help us make sure our economy is strong and that we're getting energy through these pipelines and in these reactors and under the ground to get the electrons to all the great stuff that we get to take advantage of, which right now is artificial intelligence. I'm sure y'all talked about it a lot today. My flight was delayed out of DFW, so I literally just walked in. So I didn't get to catch a lot of the earlier conversations, but we've spent this year, I think we've hosted 12 roundtables now. Many of you have been a part of those. And it has been a real eye-opening experience to get to see, this was last fall, pulling in big tech, pulling in the oil and gas guys, pulling in the nuclear folks, pulling in the geothermal folks, the utility folks, all into a room and everybody battling it out. Here's what we need. And us trying then to articulate that and put it into a format that's not only helpful to those people, but then to be able to come up here to Washington and to our local and state governments to be able to use that information and be as helpful as possible. So that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Just nothing really.
Yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah. Let's stay on AI since we just wrapped up a panel and you had those roundtables. What were the takeaways from industry? I know you guys have put out some reports on the intersection of AI and energy. From a policy perspective, what do you see as the biggest takeaways and the biggest fixes that we need at both the federal and state level to just build more and have that speed to power to meet the AI demand?
Compromise. I don't know if we're in an era right now in D.C. anyway, and it feels this way in Oklahoma and in Texas, and where I spend a lot of my time, where it feels like we have all the things lining up that are going to make us be able to do all the things we want to do in a really fast way. But the utility industry needs this, right? The community members don't want this in their backyard. The oil and gas folks don't know whether to amp it up or not because there isn't certainty that there's going to be interconnectedness between it all. Then you've got tech with this unbelievable life-changing technology that if we can't get them this infrastructure, we are going to turn it over to other adversaries to get ahead of it, and we're not going to be able to lead in it, even though it is our IP, which is a really awful place to be in. And so if we don't start to see a little compromise from everybody, even though we're all singing from the same hymn book, there are little pieces of this puzzle that you're not getting exactly what you want. And so everyone's going to have to give a little to be able to put some things in the works this spring. And currently right now, these executive orders are awesome, but if we can't get, House, Congress, can't get our local legislature, if everyone isn't willing to support it, it's all for naught. So I'm hopeful that there's a little more compromise in some of these conversations that will allow these things to happen at the pace that we need them to happen at.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And something so important for these permitting negotiations is trying to ensure that in that compromise you still get enough substantive reform that it actually moves the needle to build these projects, whether you're talking about new generation or linear infrastructure transmission pipelines. And so not to make sure that these compromises are watered down, but actually still get the necessary votes to pass and get signed into law.
Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit towards energy security, since that's really at the heart of why the Hamm Institute was founded and focuses so much of their work on. You said you started 4 years ago. A lot certainly changed in the geopolitical landscape in the last 4 years. Russia, Ukraine, the Middle East, but even obviously China is a huge aspect of that too. And I know you spent time traveling, kind of around the world and having conversations with our allies to ensure that the U.S. can be a good energy partner with those allies. And so, what are your takeaways from those conversations, for all energy sources? And I should note that, the Hamm Institute, certainly not just oil and gas. You really are energy abundance. You do work on geothermal. You do work on nuclear. So when you've had those international conversations, who have you been talking to? What are the outcomes? Yeah,
I've been in Asia 6 times in the past 7 months. Wow. And so what's been interesting through the lens of energy security anyway, I would say that the inconsistency is very frustrating to the Japanese and to the Korean governments. And so you start to see this volatility, and you see things amping up around Taiwan, and these are all things geopolitically that we're aware of, and we see the headlines on. And we read probably just enough to be dangerous. But when you get over there and you're talking to the Minister of Energy in Tokyo, and you're talking to him about one thing and moving things in a certain direction, and everybody getting excited about it, and then the next day it's a different headline coming from DC. And so it's what it is. It's dynamic, and things are changing every day. So no, I don't think anyone's trying to slip a fast one by. I think you really have to go into it in all of these meetings and negotiations with knowing everybody wants, the right and best thing, which is more energy to these regions. They are the largest foreign investors in the United States. And so it's tough when you're having these tariff conversations. It's been a really interesting year over there try to continue to build faith with those two economies in those two countries, because I think to really have influence in Asia and to really have any kind of impact on a counter Chinese influence, you know, we need them. We need them. And I don't know if enough people are saying that, right? It's really important to get that right. And so what I'm seeing right now is they just want consistency. And so where can we find those places that we can deliver that consistency? There are some things we know that this administration is going to be, you know, a little unpredictable on. And in a good way, keeps everyone on their toes. But for those two cultures and those two countries, that isn't important to them. So we've got to really identify things. One thing we got excited about, we were there last month with Senator Haggerty had brought a delegation over, and we helped host a big convening there at Chatham House with 30 CEOs from Korea and Japan, mostly tech companies, a few energy companies. Mostly tech and manufacturing, but what everybody, you know, after a whole day of talking, kind of at the end, you start to see some themes. One of them was nuclear, right? Like if we can start to at least have some common language around some nuclear regulatory agenda that they know that in the U.S. this is what this will look like, and then they can adjust manufacturing based off of that. They can adjust where they're going to invest based off of that, and there isn't that inconsistency that gets them scared to invest. And so that correlation of the investor piece, of the policy piece, and then of actually delivering electrons to the grid is critical in these conversations. You know, we're seeing that in the Middle East right now. What happened off the coast of Venezuela this week. I mean, it is dynamic. It is changing every single day. Most of it is actually unpredictable. You kind of get a sense this is unstable in this part of the world, but who knows when and where and how these certain things are going to happen. And then they happen, right? And we all have to adjust and quickly figure out, you know, how to help solve the challenge. And it's exciting. But, you know, we also, I think, still have a duty to deliver something that we say we're going to deliver to our allies in these different parts of the world. And that is energy security. We can pump oil and gas out of the ground all day long in this country if we want to. And some people would define that as energy security. But unless we have someone to buy it, you know, it's an asset we don't need and as much of. And so it's really important that we keep those markets open, that we keep it competitive, and that we're able to get more out there at a more affordable price. And that only happens with really thoughtful conversations with those different countries and really trying to have a few wins here and there for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, there's been a lot of things done policy-wise under the guise of energy security that haven't been all that great, that have cost taxpayers a lot of money, have cost consumers a lot of money. Renewable fuel standard comes to mind, but I don't want to bash that too much. But it really, like, if you think about what has actually provided energy security, it's more competition, it's more choice, it's that diversity. I mean, if you look at what's happening in, you know, Russia right now and Europe, you know, we've known for the longest time that they've been far too dependent on Russian gas. And finally, it took, you know, an extreme circumstance, but now they are learning that this diversification is a necessity, and the U.S. is stepping up in a big way. And so you've worked a lot on LNG exports as well. Can you talk a little bit about that and that leverage role that the United States has to play with LNG exports, both in Europe but also in Asian markets as well?
It is our secret weapon. It really is. And, you know, I think if we're able to create and help build that demand worldwide for this commodity that, you know, is the most affordable and reliable, and for the most part now a very clean option, you know, then it is the best negotiating tool we have in regard to any kind of quality of life, you know, advancement. And I think, you know, in most people would agree that would be a democratic, you know, society in those different parts of the world. And so the more we can work in that direction and really start to understand what this means and make sure there are proper infrastructure for, certain import terminals in parts of the country that haven't had them before. And that's Japan and that's Korea, right? In that part of the world. And they do a pretty good job of it, but they could do more. And they have the capital to do more and to invest more. In those parts of the world, that, around Europe, for many, many years, those projects were just sitting, and EU wouldn't fund them at all, and it's gotten even worse lately. Mm-hmm. I spent first 10 years of my career focusing on Eastern Europe. My first tour was in the embassy in Poland, and we were talking about this in the late 90s, right? Like, why do we not use the North Sea in this specific coastline to get energy into the rest of Europe, to get oil and gas into the rest of Europe? I was 22 years old and also having to literally count fish. I was counting fish imports at the coast every day. That was my very first job in the Foreign Service, and having to double check the baskets of fish that were coming in. And then I'd actually go back to the office, put it all into the very old school computer Excel worksheet, in the embassy, and then would get to work on the stuff I got excited about, which was actually energy imports at that time. I think that's just the Texan in me, kind of always excited about how to get more of our resource from the ground to the rest of the world.
How many fish are we talking about? Like per
millions.
Day? Like like you're counting?
Yeah, I mean, each basket would have 35,000.
That's wild.
Yeah, and so you just kind of had to hope by weight, and like the old jelly bean game, remember we used to play? That's basically the math I was doing. And I'm an Aggie, so my math isn't, what most people get excited about. So that's how I managed. I'm like, okay, there are 30 in this one section. We're gonna just double check it. But.
Yeah, fascinating. Let's talk China now. We heard on the last panel, Michael Bruce brought this up. He's been talking about it a lot. Just the way that they operate is just on a different level. Yeah. And that's not to suggest that we should be operating like them and being a communist regime that just finances everything through the government. But when you talk about what they're doing on nuclear, the amount of nuclear they build in the past decade is kind of more than we have operating right now on wind and solar, on like EVs and the cost declines they've had on EVs and batteries, as well as critical minerals and critical mineral processing. How do you see, especially kind of from your free market lens, as the best way to address some of these challenges, particularly I think in the critical mineral space, because we've seen those challenges. This government is certainly this administration, I should say, is certainly attempting to restart that and reshore and friendshore a lot of those activities. But what do you think we need to see to actually make that happen? The supply chain piece on the critical minerals challenge, I don't know that we're paying enough attention to. Everyone's trying to figure out where do we get this source and how do we get it over to where we need it to be able to actually build what we need to build with these minerals in order to take full advantage of this opportunity. And that piece just isn't probably getting the attention it needs. We are hyper-focused right now on really trying to make sure that, we're not buying those from China. And how do we stop that? And sure, that's first, but then what? If we don't actually figure out how to get it from point A to point B from an ally or to be able to source ourselves, we're not going to have solved the problem. Someone else will buy it, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm a little concerned I'm actually very concerned about the critical minerals piece. If we really don't figure that supply chain infrastructure, how to move it. And that's a huge part. I think in general, it's the same in regard to China. It is always going to be, always. Nothing has changed here. It will always be the same approach with them. We have to move faster. It's speed, it's speed, it's speed. And so they move faster at everything. So, okay, great. Let's say we have all the answers to being able to secure critical minerals in a way that we are comfortable with, and a way that the U.S. can still feel like we're leading in it and should be. But how do we do it at that speed? And if we've spent that much time on that, where else now are they starting to catch up? The nuclear build is remarkable.
there in what is happening. And so that's a really important thing to read about if you haven't yet, and truly understand how quick they're able to build. It's basically free, essentially, and the amount of power that they're going to be able to bring to the grid there, to attract to their own grid the kind of data centers and that, the scale that the rest of the world needs. So even if we get it right here and we move as fast as we want to, whether it's 50 gigawatts, it's 100, it's whatever it is, you can probably go ahead and times 10 that for how fast China will move on it and how much they will build. Hello.
I'm not crossing the stage. I'm sorry.
No,
Good to see you.
it's good to see you.
Hey, how are you?
I'll give you a hug too. Good to see you. Thanks for
Sorry,
being
I
here.
was meant to be here earlier, but got called to the chief of staff's office, so I'm a little tired.
That happens. Yeah. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here.
No,
Yeah.
thanks for having me.
And they are probably tired of my Texas drawl with a raspy cold right now.
No, I think that's
So-
livening up the crowd.
No, let's let Jarrod take most of these, and if I can add anything, I will. But
Yeah, sure.
we're
Well,
happy
Jarrod,
you're here.
Yeah.
needs no introduction, Executive Director, National Energy Dominance Council. Jarrod, thanks for being here. We've, I'll just dive right into the questions because I know we're getting short on time and we're close to cocktail hour. You've spent, since you've taken this role, have spent so much time listening to industry about what their challenges have been, and kind of playing the role of firefighter and putting a lot of these challenges out through fixing these problems. What do you see as those biggest challenges you're hearing from industry? I know permitting reform is obviously kind of like number 1, 2, and 3 probably, but are there ways in which we can take what you're doing and systemically change how we are permitting energy projects in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it exactly. That's what I was going to say. Permitting reform. We've talked about it every day at the White House. We've had a lot of progress in doing what we can do from the executive level of taking a 2-year permitting process and shortening it to weeks in some instances. And I did a kind of event this morning focused just on critical minerals, and it's just kind of unbelievable where we've moved over the course of the year of using Fast 41 and using some of the other tools within the federal government of just transforming how mining is done in the United States of permitting. Now, the one thing I say, and this is also, it's tied to permitting reform, but we can move fast to get the permits done. What often slows down and stops these projects are crazy lawsuits that are just essentially done exactly for tactical purposes to stop projects from being done. So we've got a huge mining opportunity in Arizona that could deliver a massive percentage of copper that would help the United States, and it's just been caught up in lawsuits. And so there is one of the things that the president does not want to see anymore. He wants to see projects get done and not slowed down. If we can get the permitting done, we have to have the judicial reform that's attached to it. So that's kind of 1 and 1A of what we're working with Congress to get done now is codify what we're able to do at the executive level on permitting reform, but also look at judicial review so that the lawsuits in the courts are not stopping these projects that effectively are getting their permits.
Yeah, and as a follow-up to that, after 7 county and the SPEED Act, does that get you there? Do we need more than that? There's obviously the Permit Act, which would help with Clean Water Act reform. Kind of what's your wish list to get us there?
Yeah, I mean, the wish list is more than that. And so all of it is progress, and we're working every day with Congress on how to improve it. I think, we're going to go hard, and we want as much as possible in the wish list. And so there's probably more that we want to add. But all of it is progress. It's better than the system we have now, and the more we can codify from what we've been able to do on the executive side. I mean, it's just that's the stability that when people come in, the comment we often get is, hey, it's amazing. We love what you guys are doing. We love that the president has created this council. But how do we know? Because we got to plan 10, 20 years down the road. How do we do that if we don't have this written in law? And so That is our top priority. Even now we're working it through these last few weeks of the year. But then when we get into 2026, it's going to still be top priority for us.
Absolutely. And we do have microphones. We can start opening this up to audience Q&A. We already have one already. I'm going to pepper some in as we get going. But while you're here, I want to take advantage of this.
Sure.
Thank you. This is for Jarrod, Laura Lovelace. I assume you're looking at anything that can be put into a reconciliation package as opposed to the 60 vote, cloture needed to do this. Can any of these reforms, I know this is really broad, be put into that? Or is it just really continually incumbent upon us to lean on the 1/3 senators in blue and red states who are up for re-election and just push really, really hard, because it's going to take a really, really hard push. This is really intense midterms, and it's a huge battle. So I just want everyone to be realistic. Everybody wants compromise, but we're in a massive, massive battle, whatever side you're on. So please lean on those senators, whatever state it is, because as an energy community, we're united, especially the ones that have projects and jobs in those states. So I punt that back to you. Is there anything else we can do just to solve this issue?
I appreciate that. Thank you. You took the words out of my mouth. But no, I do think we can get some things done. I mean, particularly on permitting. Yes, there are always going to be people who just don't see the light on it. But I do think there is more momentum towards permitting reform from both sides of the aisle than I have experienced in a while. And we're getting a lot of good feedback on the legislative side. And we just need to stay on it, because I do think, given the president's just priorities of getting projects off the ground and really putting the onus on people to, explain to me why we don't want energy dominance, explain to me why we don't want critical mineral infrastructure in the U.S., or why we don't want gas pipelines up into even blue states, because their electricity prices are dramatically different than red states. And so the president's taking hey, we want to help everybody. And so I don't see why any senator or representative would be against that, because what he's trying to do is reshape both our critical mineral and our critical infrastructure as far as energy is concerned here in the U.S. It really does not make sense to be against that.
Thank you.
Devin?
Thank you. Perfect question here before that Negroni, right? I have a question for Jarrod. I'm the Director of Energy and Environmental Policy at the R Street Institute. Great to hear what the White House is thinking on permitting reform and working with Congress. We also know there's a piece of the puzzle here for speed to market that will also be done through just purely the executive, and Congress can address. And some of that will be addressing the biggest energy affordability challenge that's kind of within federal control, and that's on the transmission system. And we know that there's a bunch of technologies out there, a lot of homegrown techs that are sitting on the shelf because our system doesn't provide the proper incentives to utilize the existing transmission system well. And that lack of headroom on that system is a lot of times what's your root cause of your interconnection backlogs in these processes too. So I'm curious what the administration feels are the tools in its box that it can use to pursue just purely enhancing more efficiency and headroom out of the existing transmission system.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I literally had a chart printed out that was walking over into the West Wing today of just power generation. It literally has gone down, but the transmission has gone up. And so how do we effectively tackle that? And so this is one of the things that we're working within the White House on, executive orders that would affect the grid and affect efficiencies within the grid. And so this is a big part of what we're working on now. But I would love to anybody who has projects or technologies that they want to bring to us, because it is a very top of mind topic now of reconductoring what other technologies we can do that effectively optimize the grid. We're trying to stabilize it, which is why we use kind of the 202Cs to keep coal plants open. Now we want to optimize it. Ultimately, the final step is going to be how to grow it. So this is one of the things we want to use the power of the executive order to help on optimizing the grid.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Zach Coleman with Politico. Again, this is for Jarrod. the administration has been dealing with an affordability issue. I know that the president has said this is not a real issue, but what are you doing to address this? And also with a lot of the projects that are in the interconnection backlog are solar and storage. Is that something that you think can actually address this affordability problem if you actually start to help developers work through some of the backlog and some of the bureaucratic issues that they're dealing with right now?
Yeah, I think it's the opposite of that. I think this is part of the problem. Why you're seeing there's a divide. The electricity prices in blue states that are in the Northeast and California are dramatically higher than electricity prices in red states. And so the states that have followed what the president's energy dominance agenda is, of critical infrastructure around natural gas, around coal, those states are having much lower electricity prices. The states that have over-focused on wind and solar and have not built the natural gas, for example, infrastructure, are now down a path where their residents are paying higher prices than those who have invested in that. And so this is part of what we're trying to solve, is clear out the backlog so it's not focused on wind and solar, and then it is more focused on base load power. And this is why, for example, the president has been all about building these 2 natural gas pipelines up in the Northeast, where we've got one, the Nessie pipeline, that would cut across part of New York to help other New Yorkers. And then there's another one, Constitution Pipeline, which would take gas from Pennsylvania and get it into New England. Some of the highest electricity prices in the country are in New England. And so if you look at New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, California, they're sometimes three times higher of electricity prices than the rest of the country. And so getting gas from Pennsylvania into New England is going to drive people's electricity prices down. And so this is the kind of thing, these are the kind of projects the president has been so vocal about getting done, because it's going to help people in the area that need it most.
Yeah, and there's go ahead.
I would just add on to both of those questions. I think it got discussed today. So if it did, I apologize.
No, you're
Just
good.
cut
Go
me
for
off
it.
so
No.
it's not repetitive. But I think, what we aren't maybe talking enough about is, let's just assume we get all of this, right? Let's just give that a yes, right? That's a fun kind of hypothetical to play with. We're going to be able to do this. We're going to be able to build it fast. We're going to get the power that we need to be able to lead, on on artificial intelligence and the data centers and infrastructure to be able to compute